Alderman Kraft. Here.
And can we have, we just barely was able to hear Kirk. Can we check his volume? Kirk, can you say another word?
Yep. How is it now? Is it any better?
It is now. Yep. Perfect. All right. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to make a public comment at this time? Not seeing anybody rush forward. Item 6 is consent agenda.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second to that motion? We have a motion and a second from Volker. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that motion carries. And then on to new business is mayor's appointments. And do we have a slide? I'm looking to Michelle.
We do not have a slide for that.
We do not have a slide. We do have an appointment, and I'm forgetting the person's
That's all
name.
right. It's in your-
Josh Linseth.
Josh Linseth to the St. Croix County EDC and Krista Paulus to the CDA.
Josh Linseth for reappointment to the St. Croix County EDC Loan Review Committee, and Krista Paulus for the appointment to the Community Development Authority. Thanks, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion that we approve both of those appointments.
All right, there's a motion to approve both appointments. Is there a second to that motion? I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, Michelle, call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Lindell?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft? Yes.
All right, and that passes. Item 8.2 is the VFW request to store materials on city property, and I'll turn this over to Alderman Kittle.
Well, we had a request from the local VFW. They have an opportunity to get topsoil and fill from the railroad site, and we've been in discussion with them to how much and where would we put it. We have a couple of options. I think 2 viable options. The value of this topsoil is undetermined, but it's a high value. We need it for the project if there's a project ever going up there. And if not, we can use it in the city at some location. So the VFW has been working with the railroad people. And Noah, do you have anything else to add to the locations of this?
Yeah, so we had talked about, we looked at the possibility of the city property kind of near LWT, out in the South Industrial Park. Just kind of for reference, currently the city has a sand pile there that's about 4,000 to 5,000 cubic yards of material. In years past, we've had some black dirt, topsoil out there that we've used on different projects. The VFW is looking to have roughly 10 to 15,000 cubic yards of materials. So it is a pretty substantial amount. City staff did speak with Mr. House on Thursday last week to see, what would we have room for out in that area, and what would the city's possible need in the future be for that material. One of the concerns from staff with that site is just that we store a lot of our snow there in the winter months. We are going to be losing a couple of our current snow storage locations with the sale of the property on 140th and Double G, Freedom Park, and then possibly Mary Park in the future. So it is important that we maintain space there for snow storage, especially if we do lose those sites. In terms of the fill soil itself, we use black dirt on a regular basis. Fill soil is really good for a foundation. So we don't have really a significant use for the fill soil itself. Unless we were doing a building project where you're, again, building that foundation, that base. So, a few things, I've written down a few questions just to help facilitate the discussion, just things for the council to think about. One thing would just be who the material belongs to. Is it the cities? Is it the VFWs? Do we have a written agreement that specifies that? How long can the material stay on the site? In the future, who's responsible for trucking the material when it goes to Freedom Park? At what point is the city able to use that material, and what happens if there isn't a need for the material? If we do lose the LWT site, where are some other options when it comes to snow storage? Where can we put snow? And also just kind of thinking big picture, does it set a precedent for other requests down the future from a different organization to store things on city property? So just some things for the council to consider for this evening. And I think, Ron, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, sounds good. But yeah, I'll turn it back over to the mayor if there's any other discussion or questions that I can answer for you.
Well, actually, I have a question for you, Noah. That site, the LWT, where we have the sand, technically, is that piece of ground for sale?
Yeah, so it is. There's a small stormwater pond there, and a portion of that land is for sale.
Okay. So, and how big a lot are we talking about out there? What is that? Is it a 20-acre piece? Is it a...
There's two parcels. I don't know, the area where we're currently I want to say it's maybe 5 acres there, roughly. So, in terms of material, speaking of Dave Pufall, he felt we could probably store a couple thousand cubic yards of material, but not the 10 to 15,000 that we're looking at.
And is there another location in the city you think, or city property, I should say, that could work as a storage place?
That's the only site that we've looked at to date.
Did you look at the old compost site?
We haven't looked at that thoroughly.
And I shouldn't call it the old, it's the current compost site, the old dump, I guess, but you haven't looked at that to see what room is out?
We haven't. Dave did not look at that last week, so.
So I guess what I'd throw out is, I know they're looking for an answer. Two, as long as it's being trucked for free, I guess I would recommend looking to staff to look at, how much could be stored at LWT, how much could be stored at the current landfill site. My guess is, if the city has some needs for some of that soil, that's kind of the price for storing it there. I know the VFW's talked about for snow locations that, they would make their site available at Hatfield if that turns, or if that is helpful to the city at all. But I guess I'd leave it up to, let the VFW work with staff in the railroad company with how much dirt is feasible at either of those locations, and whatever amounts is feasible and it works out. I guess that's my recommendation.
It's also my understanding that it's not a all or nothing type deal. If we could get 3,000 or 4,000 and have a place to put it, they would accept that. We don't have to take all 15,000 because I think that would be, I don't think it'd ever be used. But some of it would be used. And if it's not used by the VFW project, it'll eventually be used by the city. So I think if we work on those two sites with some type of agreement to whether it be set aside a time limit for the VFW to only use that, and then it would be the city's possession, like a 2-year waiting period to say whatever happens, the VFW has that fill to use at their site and the city can't touch it. After that, if there's some type of need by the city or by a city residents to use that fill somewhere else, it would be available that way. But I think to have maybe a 2-year moratorium on just the VFW site using that, I think they anticipate, if things go perfectly, to be using it prior to that. So some type of agreement written down so we could have that set aside for just them, I think would be optimum. And I think city staff needs to just kind of work on those 2 sites. If there's any other site that any other councilman has that would be feasible, that would make sense to use more of that or to have a spot for that, I'd be up to that too. But those 2 sites seems at least worth exploring. I know the LWT site, I know the railroad company wants to get going fast because they have to get rid of it. If we could approve the LWT site and then in a prior meeting, a different site to use more fill or have a different location for it, that might be optimal because I know they're anxious to get going on it. So just any other discussion or?
Yeah, Craig, this is Alderman Kraft. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm recalling the past meeting where this came up, but I think we had determined at that time that we were asking the VFW to give us some kind of formalized plans that show what the plan is for the building project, just to give us a little bit more information. I don't know if those have been received yet, but I thought that was kind of the next step, was that they were supposed to submit some plans and a needs analysis to the city, and that was supposed to go to DRC. Did that not happen?
So this site plan, why don't you talk about the status of the site plan?
Yeah, so to Alderman Kraft's point, this came to the council in June. At that time, the VFW had received a grant and was looking to purchase materials to store up at Freedom Park. And at that time, the council had tabled it and wanted to wait until after a site plan stormwater application had been approved. And that has not been approved yet. That would go to DRC, Plan Commission, City Council.
But has it been submitted yet?
No.
So they have not submitted a site plan?
We don't have a complete site plan application. So
Right.
that would include...
So what is missing on the site plan? Because I was told that the site plan had been submitted.
So we have a whole checklist for our site plan. So that's grading, stormwater, utilities, lighting, landscaping. What we have right now is much more of a concept, just showing where the building would lay out on the site.
All right, so there's a few check boxes still to be done?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, it's more of it's the more formal engineered plans for the site. So, basically site plan approval and approved building plans, then the project can move forward. But at this time, it is basically is a preliminary site plan just showing where the building would lay out, preliminarily where parking and stuff would be located on the site. But we can continue to work with the VFW on what materials are needed for the site plan.
So is there a substantial amount of work to be done yet on the site plan, or is it just a few things?
In my opinion, there's a substantial amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Alderman Kraft's point, Carrie, the request for the material to go to Freedom Park was tabled because I didn't think it was appropriate, or we had the room, or we didn't know where to put it at Freedom Park. When the suggestion was made to put it elsewhere, just so we had access to it, whether it be city project or the VFW project, if it wasn't in the way anywhere else, and it would save a lot of money to not have to buy that product, to put it somewhere where we could have access to it, not at Freedom Park. I think that's when prior to needing a site plan, we would need a site plan. If it's not going up there, it's not as essential to have a site plan already and ready to go. The site plan is something that we have to get and we have to work on, and they have to get it to us as quick as they can. But I think this product of the fill and the topsoil is separate because it's not going at that location.
Okay.
Well, I think
makes
Alderman
sense.
Kelly, the points are exactly the same. We didn't approve putting material at Freedom Park because we didn't have a site plan.
Right.
And so this is no different. It's not putting it at Freedom Park, but it's putting it on city property.
Yep.
Which is going to cause a degree of conflict. We don't know how much.
Nope.
So I don't really quite understand what the deal is with the site plan. We've been talking about that for a year.
At
And we're
least.
sitting here tonight because the railroad wants to get this done and it's available this week. So we should change the rules. We just did this in June. I mean, that was 3 months ago. We still don't have a site plan. And there's not a project in town we would approve to do this for without a site plan and the DRC approving it. I don't think it's too much to ask. I don't think it was too much to ask a long time ago. Nothing's changed. So to make a commitment to allow material that the city may have no use for and may in fact have to spend money to move it at some point to be stored on city property when we don't have what we need, I don't get it. So if somebody can tell me something different to that, we've been asking for a site plan for a long time. This didn't just come up last week.
No, I agree. I'm not arguing that the site plan is a necessity that has been way overdue. But because it's not going at that site and it would save whatever project money to get this done and truck for free, I think it's an option we should explore.
I think, thank you for answering that question. My comfort level is similar to Alderman Montello's in that I know that we specifically asked for a site plan to be developed back in June. We haven't received it yet. NOAA indicated that there are potential issues with storing it at either of the locations because those locations are important for us in terms of snow storage. So Noah, could you, for us one more time, could you kind of go through what potential issues could be? I know you indicated that the fill isn't necessarily the product that we would be using, or we don't currently foresee an opportunity to use that because it's not the same as like a topsoil. So it's a little bit different in terms of, consistency and use, but also that I think you said it would cause an issue for us in terms of snow removal storage capacity.
Yeah, so on the issue of the snow storage, currently we stockpile snow during the winter months at a few different locations. We have a small stockpile by Mary Park. We store a significant amount on the land by 140th and Double G, which will be developed in the near future.
Right.
So that option may be off the table for us as soon as this winter. Another site is actually the Freedom Center site in Freedom Park. So just looking, if we start to lose a few of these, the LWT site becomes that much more important because it may end up being one of our only sites to put that snow.
No, did I understand correctly that the property at 140th and Double G is closing the 1st of March?
Correct.
So we really can't have any snow there. We can't have excess snow there. That site is probably not available to us this winter.
Correct. The developer is hoping to do soil testing this fall as soon as the crops are off the field, and that may not be an option for us this year. They're hoping to have their preliminary final plat approved prior to closing. That way, right away in the spring, they can move forward with construction.
And then what's the story with the Mary Park site?
It's a small location. It's actually on property owned by Canadian National. And due to the proximity to the Willow River, there are some concerns about having our snow draining into the river there. And so we've kind of been advised that we should look at a different location for that snow. It's not as large of a site as the other locations, but something that we know won't be an option for us for much longer.
How much do we utilize Freedom Park as a snow spot in the winter? Do we fully utilize Freedom Park? I mean, there's a lot of land out there that we could maybe use for snow.
Yeah, most of our snow is stored fairly centralized in the park, actually on what is now the VFW property. Because a portion of that is leased out for farmland. Again, we try to kind of keep it more on so we're not impacting that in the spring. So, something we could look at, but some of it's more of the convenience. If you're plowing snow in the south end of town, you don't want to truck it all the way up to the opposite end of the city. So
Yeah.
we try to have locations spread out geographically.
Right.
Questions? Mr. Green?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to speak to the site plan?
Site plan?
Yeah, Mr. House? You want to come up to the microphone? So you heard the discussion, you hear that's
Yes, sir.
a source of what is the site plan and the status of it.
I'd just like to make 2 comments. Last year, Jeremiah called me and asked if the city could store snow on the Freedom Park land. It took us about 15 minutes to resolve that, and snow was stored on Freedom Park land. And we would be ready to entertain the storage of city snow on Freedom Park land again this year. So that's not a problem for us if it's a solution for you. I am not a contractor. I have no experience in building projects. So I rely on 2 sources. My sources are CBS Squared, the surveying firm that we've hired, and Mark Johnson, the head of commercial construction at Derrick Construction. Both of them have been given copies of the criteria for a site plan. I have talked to both of them personally, and we have submitted a PDF file to the city as of the 11th of August. It went to Mr. Darrow. My understanding from both CBS Squared and from Mark Johnson is that those site plans meet the criteria for the industry of a preliminary site plan. If there are missing elements, there may be a couple. I'm not sure. I would request those folks to be in touch with NOAA and articulate exactly what's missing. But the PDF file was sent to Mr. Darrow on the 11th of August.
All right, then we'll look into that, get that figured out, what's missing, what needs to get done, so we can get that moving forward.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other council members? All right, what is your pleasure, council?
I would make a motion that we have city staff and the VFW continue to work on a spot and a location and an agreement for a portion of the fill to be used at the VFW site and would be stored at LWT site and wherever site we can put it temporarily, whether that be the landfill or others.
All right, so the motion is to allow, basically, through staff, figure out locations and amounts for temporary storage. That's kind of my short summation. We can get more detail if you'd like. So that's the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
There's a second by Alderman Volkert. Discussion. Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Lindell,
No.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
No.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
No.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
So that brings it to a 3-3 tie. I will break the tie in the form of a yes with the commitment to this council that this site plan will be resolved very shortly. So that is my commitment to the council.
very shortly, maybe we get the city attorney to tell us his legal advice on those terms for definition purposes.
For what very shortly
Yeah.
definition is?
Sure.
My goal is yet this, within the next month or two.
Okay.
All right. That is my commitment to this council. All right. Item 8.3 is the Director of Public Works job description update.
So Mayor and Council, as you're aware, we are currently have a job posting out for the Director of Public Works position. This was, however, having received feedback from Jeremiah Wendt, our previous Director of Public Works, as well as some of our current city staff and some other Directors of Public Works for other communities, we are looking to make a couple of revisions to the qualifications for that position. Currently, a civil or environmental engineering bachelor's degree is required. Has to be in one of those two areas. We'd like to open that up for some other fields, again, just to attract a wider pool of candidates. So this could include construction management. This could include project management. And then we also want to look at the requirement, whether they have to be a certified public engineer. And again, this wouldn't be to say that we may not select a candidate in the future who is a certified public engineer, but in speaking with Jeremiah himself, he felt that that was not a prerequisite for someone to apply. So far to date, we have not received a single candidate for the position. And a lot of times when it's listed as a minimum qualification or requirement to apply, there could be some other good candidates out there with significant amount of experience in that work. It could even be a current Director of Public Works for another community who would not be eligible to apply if they don't meet that minimum qualification. And so city staff were looking again to hopefully attract a wider pool of candidates by changing those minimum qualifications. Again, not to say that we may not select an individual who is a public engineer, but hopefully that kind of casts a wider net. Because of that possible change, we would also look to extend our deadline a couple of weeks. Currently the deadline, I believe, is September 24th. And so if we were going to update the current posting that's out there, we would want to push the deadline back accordingly so that if there is a candidate out there who maybe saw the posting but felt that they were not going to apply, they would now have time to do so. I believe Sarah Reese, our HR manager, is also on the call if you have specific questions for her, but hopefully that's a good overview for you for now.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the job description changes as proposed by staff.
All right, there's a motion we have a motion and a second to accept the changes recommended by staff. Is there any discussion?
I just think it's imperative that we get somebody with as much experience as we can find. I just think the days of going back and farming out every single thing we do for an engineering work is something we can't get back into. But if this opens up the candidates to be able to get more experience or just in a field that we need, we have to do that. We just, in my opinion, we just can't go back to the days of certain companies just doing everything for us. And that's what helped us so much with Jeremiah and his intelligence and his experience and his degree. We need to find somebody like that. I think it's important. So
I agree. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I wondered, back in the spring, we put a hiring freeze in place. Apparently that doesn't apply to this position.
You're freezing up. We didn't hear the last statement.
Well, he was saying that we put a hiring freeze in place this spring, and he said that doesn't apply to this position. Kirk, correct me if I just restated that for you.
That's correct.
I would say this is too important of a position to have it include in the freeze.
And I would say, Kirk, that my understanding was the hiring freeze definitely applied to adding any staff, not necessarily replacing staff. That's just what my understanding of that was.
Well, I agree. This is an important position. I just am looking for consistency in our decision making.
Sure.
Well, I think the hiring freeze was what I took out of the hiring freeze was basically the summer help that we normally had. This is the replacement position. I didn't assume that was part of the hiring freeze. I think this is just replacing a position that is necessary to run the city.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Lindell.
Yes.
All right, item 8.4 is the Nature Center to Doar Prairie Trail Construction Services Contract.
Mayor and Council, the next several items are related to a trail project that'll connect the Nature Center to the Doar Prairie restoration. This project is scheduled to begin this week and be completed in early to mid-November, weather dependent. The first item related to this matter is the contract with SCH. This contract amount is in the amount of $44,500. We do have to just change the authorized signature on on several of these materials, had Jeremiah's name listed, so I did want to point that out to you. As a reminder, half of the project cost is funded through a grant through the DNR. So the city share would actually be half of that amount. So the staff recommendation would be to approve the agreement with SCH that's included in your packet in the amount of $44,500.
I would make a motion we approve the construction services agreement with SEH in the amount of $44,500, half of which would be responsible for the city and half by the DNR grant.
All right, there's a motion to approve the contract. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
And we have a motion by Alderman Carey. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Lindell.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Item 8, that motion passes. Item 8.5 is the Nature Center to Doar Prairie Trail, the Casey easement.
So this is the first of 3 easements on the agenda. This would be on Dan Casey's property. If you're familiar with the site, this would be on the north side of the bridge. I should say the northwest side of the bridge, if that makes sense. West side of the Willow River. Again, the trail makes an underpass underneath the existing bridge. So this is a small easement, basically, kind of going near the driveway, if you're familiar with that site. The easement was prepared by the city attorney's office. So the staff recommendation would be to approve the easement as included in your packet.
And is there any cost to this easement?
No, any costs for preparing the document itself would be included in just the overall project cost.
And the planting of arborvitae?
Yeah, they would look to plant some vegetation. The trail comes pretty close by the first house there, and we felt that was a reasonable request to include in the project scope.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I would make a motion to approve the easement agreement with Danny Casey.
All right, there's a motion to approve the Casey easement. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
And Carrie Kraft, Alderman Kraft does the second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Lindell.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
And that motion passes. And 8.6 is the Nature Center to Doar Prairie Trail, easement number 1. And I'm just looking at Nick. Can we do the next two easements together?
You sure
Easement
can.
1 and easement 2?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, so there's two easements. It's just two different parcels, both owned by Pat and Nancy Doar. Again, this would be on the south side of the trail, on the west side of the Willow River. So similar as the first motion, this is the easement for the trail to go across their property.
Does anybody have any questions on that or either one of those easements? All right, I would entertain a motion, and you can combine easement 1 with easement 2 in the motion if you so choose.
I would make the motion to approve the easement agreement between the City of Richmond and Patrick Doar, easement 1 and easement 2.
All right, there is a motion to pass or to approve easement number 1 and easement number 2 for the Doar Prairie Trail. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion by, a second by Tom. So any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell, Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
All right, and that motion passes. So item 9 is closed session to review performance data related to Public Works employee pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C.
I'd make a motion we go into closed session.
We have a motion to go into closed session. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to go into closed session. Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell, Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert, Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
All right, we'll be in closed session. Sarah, I don't think we need you in closed session. So if you're still listening, you should be free to go. And
Thank you.
you're very welcome. And I did talk with Sarah earlier today about whether she wanted to be or not. She left it kind of to us. So I think we're going to have more of a discussion with Nick. So I think there's a different number to call in for closed session. So we'll take a break for a couple minutes, let you guys get redialed back in on the closed session line.
Recording has stopped.
Yeah, we'll figure out what's going on with that.